Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today, I get to sit down with Ross Farrow, who is currently a serial entrepreneur. He's led over 200 million in exits, is an author, and is currently the founder of two different companies, which is Voya AI and Epi. Ross, can we please begin with your background story as a CFO and how it led you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, for sure. So, I started off, actually, even before I became a CFO, if I go back to my journey when I was at school and university, with my ADHD and certain
Yeah.
areas and certain topics in certain subjects I was always very passionate about and others not so interested in. So I always got labeled with, you're not going to amount to anything, you're not going to have any success. You spend too much time playing around and not focusing on the right things, or too interested in certain areas and not focusing on the bigger picture or everything. And so I think that kind of really made me want to prove that I could, and really gave me quite a lot of resilience and
Mm-hmm.
determination. So, I had this view that I wanted to become an accountant. Wanted to work in finance. One day I wanted to lead a business. I wanted to lead the financial side of the business. My goal was to be CFO of a list co at some point. And so, I was lucky enough to be presented with the opportunity to head up the finance team for a video games company back in 2000, well, 13, 14 by that time. And so, I jumped at that opportunity and I really put all my focus and energy into it, and really made myself, hone in all my ADHD skills as much as possible to learn as much as possible and really try and outperform as strongly as I could. And so that really, led us to our first exit of $70 million in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
That was to a list co in Hong Kong, which
In which
obviously,
company was this? My
uh, this
apologies.
this was a company, Splash Damage. And
Okay.
so this really kind of gave me my first insight into what a
Mm-hmm.
CFO for an IPO company would be like. At which point I decided, hang on a minute, not quite sure this is for me. It's too much responsibility. Well, not it's not so much responsibility. It's all the enhanced disclosures and the nitty gritties of, and then that kind of also really started to fuel, what did I want to do next. And luckily, some of my friends from there and business partners wanted to go and do something else. And so we thought, well, actually, we've learned all these skills about how to build a video games company to include business processes, finance processes, etc. And so we came up with the idea of creating our own private equity business model, where we would invest and help restructure and
Mm-hmm.
essentially grow up video games companies that were highly technical or highly artistic. Um, and so that kind of led us onto our second part of the journey, where I was CFO, CIO for, and we then bought a few different companies. Some went well, some not so well. As usual with your entrepreneurial journey, I think you kind of come across,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and that led to our second exit for 144 million dollars, for a Polish
Of the
company.
private equity.
Yeah, well, we sold one of the
Okay.
companies within the private equity.
Okay.
And so yeah, so then that was kind of like my career as a CFO was all the way through that journey. And it was, just one of the big things that we did from a finance perspective was, you can mask your numbers through profit, loss, EBITDA, revenue, etc. But for a business to really succeed, you need to focus on the cash generation of the business, the cash inflows, the cash outflows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And essentially, if you think of a black box, if I put $1 in, how much do I
Mm-hmm.
need to spend? How much is left in there?
Sure.
And then keep on cranking that wheel.
Of
And that was
course.
the philosophy that we kind of brought in from the finance side, which
Yeah.
actually leads very nicely into becoming an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur you get very bogged down with your accountant saying your revenue is
Yeah.
up, your profit is down, cash flow is in the toilet, and it's like, okay, well, forget all of those different terminologies, because most entrepreneurs aren't finance people or finance orientated. So think about the cash flows of the business is what a lot of entrepreneurs really need to
Mm-hmm.
focus on.
Understood. And you did something very unique with a specifically video games company, leading that to an exit with your team. What's something I'm interested in learning more about is how do the market dynamics differ in a video games company compared to other ones? Because you've had the opportunity to work in other kinds of industries.
Yeah, well, I did work in other industries beforehand. I'd worked in,
Hmm.
publishing for finance journals through to insurance business, through to an auction company in art and antiques. And I think when you think about it, the underlying principles of finance are very generally applicable across different industries. And especially when you kind of adapt more of the entrepreneurial finance mindset, which is more focused on cash, not what I did 2 months ago, a month ago. Am I up or down against previous year? It's, where am I right now? Where do I want to get to? And what is the delta to get to where I want to get to? And how do I create that business momentum, that cash flow movement, and that financial growth from there?
And what was the key to growing the video games company? Like, what were the key activities and the key new projects that had to be added to make that happen?
Well, I mean, it was very much about, trying to balance our resources.
Okay, resource.
We were because we were predominantly working in work for hire in the first company. So, we would sell man month rates. We could then work out how much profit we were making per man month rate on per
Hmm.
person. And then
Hmm.
because obviously our ambition was to transition into our own products, into our own games. So, how much of that cash can we reinvest, and
Hmm.
building that mechanism of free cash flow reinvestment, which is then going to further grow, further fuel the growth of the business, and then keep on adding that cash flow back in. So it's like,
Got it.
for every dollar I make, for every dollar I sell, I'm making 25 cents. I'm going to, put 10 cents in the piggy bank in case for a rainy day. I'm
Hmm.
going to keep 5 cents as essentially, my buffer. And then 10 cents I can reinvest back in on every
Hmm.
dollar. So that's going to add more headcount into new projects, new opportunities, and
So,
kind of building that focus.
from what I'm understanding, it's primarily understanding how the resources are being utilized and what kind of impact it's having in the business that was a primary focus that allowed it to grow.
Yes, exactly. And
Excellent.
how can I redistribute and redeploy that to even grow further and fuel that growth?
Excellent. And what was it being reinvested into? Was it more employees or was it certain projects?
Into certain projects, and
Hmm.
those projects would either then become our own projects or projects that
Hmm.
then we could sell to other partners in the future.
Excellent. And from here, you started a private equity and you actually acquired different companies. What were
Yeah.
your key indicators with your team, of course, or yourself to understand whether or not you should be going forward with a certain company and the kind of potential to be having?
Yeah, so well, there were a few different ones. So first of
Hmm.
all, obviously, is what was the potential, especially looking at the team, what capabilities did they have, what skill sets did they have, what areas were they missing that we thought we
Hmm.
could add value to,
Mm.
because obviously, the generally, well, especially in the tech space and including video games, there are a
Hmm.
lot of highly technical, highly talented individuals,
Right.
sometimes who don't necessarily have the correct business processes. So
Mm.
where we
Okay.
saw our strength was taking what we'd learned in all that time before and developed our
Yeah.
processes from reading as many business books as we possibly could get our hands
Yeah.
on, and adapting those best practices. How could we bring those best practices in to help those teams to
Hmm.
grow their talent, to improve their internal processes, to be able to achieve the growth that they really wanted to achieve?
And now, one of the companies you acquired went to $100 million exit. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. It went to $144 million exit. Yes.
$144 million exit. How did you know to what was that company and how did you know to acquire it? And what were the key steps to making it ready to be an exit?
Yeah. So it's a Polish company called Flying Wild Hog.
Okay.
They were super talented, highly technical, very
Hmm.
artistic team, very talented. They didn't have a great shareholder who didn't invest in them, didn't I think he saw that the opportunity was for him to be able to make money and to enjoy a certain lifestyle rather than thinking about investing into them for a capital growth and to back the team. And so we looked at the team. We understood what their capabilities were, what their abilities were. Some areas where they could lacked a little bit of
Hmm.
knowledge, and so that's essentially what we were looking for. Is how can we help the team achieve the objectives they wanted to, help them grow, and help them to
Got it.
actually work with a shareholder who was hopefully a bit more friendly, a bit more nicer to them.
So you're finding gaps in their operations where you know you have the skill set to add value in, and that's how you chose to go forward with those companies. And is that similar? Are those similar indicators across the kinds of companies you were acquiring at the time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, excellent. And when it came to making it ready for an exit to be acquired, I mean, you had what had to change specifically from the moment you acquired it to the moment it was sold? What had to change?
Yeah, I think one of the big things was realizing that they owned the IP, that they had
Mm-hmm.
creative control, that they were actually the ones who were the creators and the visionaries, and how could we package that up and present that in a way that obviously was very exciting to a larger player in the market and what they were
Mm-hmm.
interested. And so it's about, putting that together, presenting the case studies, making sure the contractual terms are organized, the IP ownership is there, that
Mm-hmm.
there's the potential revenue streams coming in year 3, year 4, year 5, the long tails of revenue, which then obviously the company that's acquiring it could look at, especially
Mm-hmm.
considering at the time that it was we were talking to public companies, and
Mm-hmm.
so obviously then become accretive to their value, uh, and so then it met their needs with our
Yeah.
capabilities and our talents.
Mhm. Now, Ross, you wrote a book called The Lost Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about the essence of the book?
Yeah, so it's very much around my journey afterwards in terms
Mm-hmm.
of becoming an entrepreneur myself, and also reflecting on that time. Even though I was in finance, I was very entrepreneurial and probably my own entrepreneur at the same time. And it comes down to the resilience and the mindset that you have to build and to hold on to during that journey, because any entrepreneur, even business leader or people who want to become an entrepreneur, you have a vision, you clearly usually have a mission as well. And how do you articulate that vision and that mission clearly enough for people to understand? And even when people don't understand it, they're going to criticize you. They're going to say it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to succeed. It's not going to happen, right? And this kind of falls very much back into most of my life, where everything that I've said I'm going to go and do or set out to do, people are like, no, that's not going to work. Or you're not focused enough, or you don't have the right talent for it, or expertise, or knowledge. And so it very much falls into the mindset that you have to build in within the resilience as well. So it's about, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want to do, and I'm
Yeah.
going to do it. And then you tell people you're going to go and do it, you go and do it, and you
Yeah.
tell people you've done it. Obviously, during the journey, you're going to have these bumps, ups, and downs, but it's important to bring yourself back in within
Mm-hmm.
yourself and listen to your instinct and to your intuition. And it's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
I am going to do this because it is going to add value, it is of
Yes.
importance, and it's something that I want to do. So it's very much focused in terms of the mindset of an entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
and what the mindset an entrepreneur needs to adapt.
Yes.
And I think it's also a good guide when you're in those different situations to refer back to and go,
Agreed.
well, hey, I need to go back to this point because to remind myself of where I'm trying to get to or where I'm trying to go.
Absolutely. And I want to say something really quick about the mindset, and I have a follow-up question regarding your book. One is, I think a lot of individuals don't stress mindset as much because your mindset actually changes how you perceive circumstances. If something negative happens to you as an entrepreneur, if you have the correct mindset, you'll perceive it in the correct way. However, if you have the incorrect mindset, you'll think this is the end of the world, and therefore
Yeah.
you'll quit. So it's a difference maker. I do see that a lot of individuals in general have this misconception that that mindset is not actually productive or a good use of their time. But when you build your mindset, you're actually capable of perceiving circumstances the way it should be seen to be able to succeed in the long term, right? So I think that was a very good point you made. And about an entrepreneur's journey, one of the most one of the cornerstones of an entrepreneur's journey is uncertainty. How do you navigate uncertainty?
That's a very good question, because every day is uncertain.
Mhm.
Even multiple times during the day, you have these different uncertainties, and as you said, right, it's about overcoming it and the change in mindset. But your mindset, even during a day, in a week, will go from being positive to, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? It's not going to work. And so it's important to build those tools, those techniques to pull yourself back up. And that's one of the things that I tried to focus on in the book is,
Mhm.
multiple times a day, every day, I have moments where I self-doubt, so, worry about something. And then it's like, whoa, you have to pull yourself back. Hang on a minute. Why am I
Mhm.
doing this? What's the bigger purpose? What is the big objective? Okay, now I can go back again. Or sometimes, you'll spend days in that situation, in that mindset, and it's like, okay, so how do I clear my mind? How do I refocus?
Mhm.
How do I get back on track? And I think that's one of the big important things around the mindset and the entrepreneurial journey, because and
Yeah.
building the resilience to not quit and not
Yeah.
give up when everyone's
Yeah.
telling you, just walk away now before you create more losses, before you get yourself into more trouble. Well,
Yeah.
I've already lost, so I need to pick myself back up to get back on top, to fight
Mhm.
again, to try and rebuild what I had or what I have, or to try and get to where I want to get to. And that's the resilience, that's the mindset that an entrepreneur really needs.
I love it. And what was something that was really interesting to me is, your whole life you've been told you can't do something, right? You're
Yeah.
not able to do something. What do you tell yourself in your mind, or what goes on in your mind that allows you to overcome that? Because some people don't overcome this.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I think this is the thing that, it kind of hit me a few years ago, and I write about this in the book, that there's no such thing as a no. It's just a complicated yes. And
Hmm.
actually, if you think about it from a mathematical perspective,
Hmm.
negative plus negative equals positive.
Yes.
So, so no plus no equals yes. So there's a way to get to a yes. It's just take the no's, see,
Yeah.
the where why it's a no, and transform it into an opportunity, change it from a negative into a positive. Okay, so going B2B is not going to be the option. So then I'm
Hmm.
going to go B2C, for example, or vice versa, or the other way around, right? And always, there's some really interesting books and thoughts,
Yeah.
especially like John Mullins around like Plan B. And so quite often in a negative situation, a Plan B is going to present itself. So think of it as an opportunity rather than a blocker. So
Hmm.
and then course correct, and you have to keep on course correcting all the way through your entrepreneurial journey. Okay, it's not going to work down this way. I'm going to go that way and see how that goes, and so forth. And so that's essentially where I got to with my yes 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 mindset, which is there's no such thing as a no. It's just a complicated yes. So it just means you have to put more effort in, more work, try and find a different alternative or a different opportunity and go for it.
Absolutely. I think challenging the no, knowing why they said no is incredibly important, right? Because it might not just be the actual, the product or service you have to offer. Perhaps it's something that they're missing about it or something that's missing in your offer. And then
Yeah,
maybe it's understanding that as a follow-up, potentially.
yeah, yeah. Or
And
they or they just don't
but
understand. And sometimes, it's good, it's fine. Okay, it's not for you. Great, no
mhm,
worries. That it's going to be for someone. There's someone
yeah,
else out there who it's going to be for.
absolutely. Now, Ross, how do you believe in your journey when no one else does?
That's a good one. I don't know. Maybe sometimes you just have to be a bit bullish about it and go, no, I can imagine the world where this is important. But I also reflect very much about, why am I doing this, right? And I'm doing this because I see an issue, a problem, and I can see a solution. And it's usually quite often a problem that I've suffered with, or I have to deal with, or I see other people having the same problem. And so then clearly, well, if there's this problem exists, then there has to be a solution, and there has to be a way to find a solution that fixes that problem. And there's going to be other people who are still suffering or have the same problems that you have or that you can see, and they're going to be wanting your solution. So you should go for it and provide that solution for the better of humanity, or the better of the people, better of ourselves, along the
Mhm.
journey.
Absolutely. And actually, you begin with a very important question, the why, right? I actually did a TED talk about finding your why. And I think that when you truly understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, especially for the long term and the kind of impact you'll be making with whatever you're doing, I think that's the difference maker when you're basically very uncertain about things and everything's going wrong. I think having a really strong why is going to be something that changes, makes a big difference for you, right? Because if you have a strong enough why, you'll be wanting to spill blood. You'll be wanting to spill time and effort into what you're doing to make it happen. You'll be compelled to do it. Your blood, sweat, and tears when you know why you're doing it. So the what I want to talk more about now is Voya AI. Can you tell me more about that company?
Yeah, so basically, well, it's a big problem I've had for probably the last 10 years, pretty much, is, from having a PA who's trying to book my travel and, end up paying over the top for certain flights or accommodation, through to not having the right opportunity, right choices. One of the things because I've been doing my own travel for the last 10 years, I end up with tens or 20 different tabs open with different flights, different accommodations, transfers. Do I go on a Tuesday? Do I go on a Wednesday, etc., yada yada. And so, I started playing around with AI, and obviously AI, you can create an itinerary, but you can't book it. Your confirmations still come from 10 different websites. So there's no one consolidator or aggregator. And so what we're building with Travel AI, with our Travel AI Voya, is essentially one place where you can have an AI conversation, which actually acts like your personal travel agent, who's going to be able to find you everything from
Wow.
flights, accommodation, through to restaurants, and actually book it. And you're going to have everything in one place so you can refer back to it. And we want to get it to the point where it's actually also your assistant, where hopefully it's going to tell you when you're running late to get to the airport, your check-in desk is D3 and your B26 gate is your estimated gate. So you know
Wow.
exactly where you're getting to, and you're not stressed looking at 10 different apps trying to
Yes.
work your way out. So that's where we're trying to get to with our Voya AI.
And as of right now, is it specialized in being able to work with all airlines and all hotels?
Yeah, so at the moment we've
Wow.
we've we've got connections into, so our first version, which is out now, it has an AI travel itinerary planner integrating into
Hmm.
Google Maps, so you can do public transport as well. And
Hmm.
also we've got flights. Uh, Hopefully by within the next 30 days we should have accommodation in there, and then we'll be moving on to restaurants and activities and events. So you'll be able to plan it and
On those
book it.
travel plans.
Yes, yes, yes.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's actually a really important point because when you think about traveling, right, a lot of people are going to places they're not accustomed to. They don't know this area. If there's the ability to learn more about that through the AI, I think that that's going to be excellent because, again, there's not a the reason you're traveling there is because you don't know much about the area. And if you can understand what is culturally available there for like events, for what's actually unique there, and you know more about it, and you're able to select it as an option before you get there, I think that's been an amazing opportunity. So
Yeah.
that sounds like it's amazing. And then you now also do MP, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a plant-based food company, and one of the
Mhm.
things was, as I was going through my wellness journey and trying to improve my diet,
Mhm.
I do a lot of sailing, outdoor activity, and so when you're getting wet, you usually just chuck in 3 or 4 chocolate bars in your pocket and stand up on deck and get soaked, and then you have
Yeah.
this spike of sugar rush and then crash. And it's the same for people who are doing marathons or running, etc.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to do something a bit more plant-based. And
Okay.
so, one of the things we found is that we use hemp seeds, and hemp seeds are super high in fiber, protein, as well as nutrition. So it can really sustain the nutrition for a longer period of time. And
Hmm.
obviously, for people who want to do more of a plant-based diet, it's important to be able to get that fiber, that
Of
protein
course.
into your diet on a regular basis. And so hemp seeds is actually one of the things on the planet that actually can do that. Plus, it's also a very environmentally friendly. So for every ton of
Hmm.
hemp we grow, we can clean 1.6 tons of CO2 emissions, uh, as opposed to like almonds that deplete natural water reserves, or oats that the intensity of farming of it leads to increased usage of fertilizers and therefore metals into the food. And so hemp is, we see as one of the sustainable opportunities for more of a plant-based protein intake going forwards, and we're very excited about what we can do with that.
Hmm. If one thing could change because this company exists, what would you want it to change?
I would like it to change how we view our food resources, and actually, think about more of a balanced diet, and not
Hmm.
expect to have the ability to have chicken 3 times a day, or beef
Hmm.
3 times a day, because
Hmm.
that's, in my opinion, what has actually destroyed the planet in terms of carbon emissions, is
Hmm.
from our intense agriculture and farming, as opposed to, traveling, or driving even a car.
Yeah.
It's actually scientifically proven that most of our carbon emissions and the destruction of our planet is actually coming from our food sources. So I'd like to see some positive impact into that.
Got it. And I want to ask you one or two personal questions about you.
Yeah.
And the first question I had for you is, what is something about your life that you wish more people knew about?
Oh gosh. um, I guess that having lived with ADHD and
Hmm.
Asperger's, a lot of people don't necessarily understand some of my mannerisms or behaviors, and sometimes I seem to be like the oddball or the odd character, or have times where I don't feel so comfortable or happy in certain situations. And
Hmm.
generally, I think it's about understanding that that isn't something that is really necessarily always in my control, and
Hmm.
hasn't always been in my control. I think these days I can control it way better than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think also, that's one of the things that I've had to kind of really work on very hard, is, to deal with my emotions, the way I process things, the way I
Hmm.
understand things, compared to, most people who, for some people, certain things seem quite trivial and quite easy,
Yeah.
whereas sometimes for me it seems a little bit more complex and a little bit harder. And I think, it's important for us to start to understand that no individual is actually made exactly the same, and to have a little bit of empathy and understanding for each other's quirks, or weirdnesses, right? Um, and I think it's
Yeah.
important for us to understand those things.
I may have recalled this incorrectly, but I think in the beginning of the episode you mentioned you used ADHD to do work or something. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I mean, like, sometimes it's great. It's
Yeah.
terrible. It's a curse and it's a brilliance, because, you
Hmm.
know, I will procrastinate and delay doing as much admin or basic day-to-day tasks as possible. But then when I have to crunch and I have to nail something, then I can go non-stop, and I can super focus and get really stuck into things, which can also be frustrating for other people if they're in a meeting with me. You know, I can go 4 hours non-stop in a meeting, whereas someone's like, I need a bio break, and it's like, well, why? Let's just finish this. We're almost there. So it's a curse and a blessing at the same time, and it's about finding the balance, and making sure that you can try and find that balance is super important. But yeah,
I think
sometimes it can be really useful.
And I think having that perspective of its brilliance, but it's also its drawbacks, I think it's an important perspective. But for most of your life, right, you said that you've had people misunderstanding your mannerisms.
Yeah.
How did you grow to deal with that situation?
I mean, I think, I've had to go through a lot of different valuable life lessons. I think also the thing is I've actually probably become quite lucky in the last 5 or 10 years, where actually I've managed to kind of attract people who are more on the same level of thinking as I am. And I respect my inner circle, my close group of friends, my close people who I appreciate their advisory, and I can be more open, I can be more transparent with them. And I think that's one of the things that's really helped me in the last decade.
Excellent. So what I'll do now is share a quick perspective regarding fitness and health, and from there we can have a conversation more about your next year plans, and we can conclude the podcast from there. The
Sure.
perspective that I really want to share today regarding fitness and health is truly challenging the requirements of making the physical transformation and challenging the status quo. A
Mm.
lot of what individuals believe is the only way to make your physical transformation is if you're extremely strict on your diet and if you are only going to a studio or going to a gym and exercising. The issue with
Yeah.
this perspective is as to follows. One, a lot of entrepreneurs and executives who watch this podcast, right? If their schedules are packed, they're not going to be adhere to that specific approach where they have to go to a gym, they have to go to a studio and they exercise. And then number two is when you have to be really strict, like you can't enjoy your favorite foods, you can't actually enjoy chocolate or any of those things. That's a misconception. And it also leads you to feel like you're kind of putting in more willpower every single day. It
Yeah.
stacks up because willpower is a finite reserve. It can only be so strong.
Yeah.
So those are the main concerns I want to bring up, and I want to challenge them because if you look at the requirements of making a physical transformation, a successful physical transformation, you see that none of those misconceptions or those concerns I brought up earlier are actually true. If you look at a physical transformation, what actually drives a successful one is a negative energy balance. And what is that? It means you get the right amount of movement and you get the correct calorie intake, right? With those two defined, to attack the second problem of the time, which one takes most of our time? It's a movement. So how can we do that in the most time efficient way possible? My perspective is that you should be prioritizing something you can do anytime and anywhere, especially something you can do while you're taking a phone call. Because if you're able to take a phone call and do the very thing that's responsible for your physical transformation, your barriers for making your own transformation go down nearly zero. And the specific movement I would recommend is leveraging something like step count. Because it doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter if you're in the house, doesn't matter if you are traveling, you're using via AI to travel somewhere. You can essentially be able to do this very thing that will be responsible for you to make the physical transformation. And number two, when it comes to actually enjoying the process, a lot of people don't believe me, but I actually ate an entire bar of chocolate and Rice Krispie every single day of my personal 70-pound weight loss journey. And the reason I was able to do that is because I understood the actual requirements. So if you have the correct amount of food intake and the caloric intake, and you have the correct amount of movement, those
Yeah.
two requirements are making up what's actually required to make your physical transformation. And from there, you can actually understand what things can change and become more available to you. So the main perspective I want to share is challenge the requirements, and only by challenging the requirements can you understand what avenues are possible to make it happen. And
Yeah.
that was the primary perspective I want to share today regarding fitness and health. And with that, we can conclude this part of the conversation and move on to your next year plans, Ross.
Yeah, well, actually, just to add to that, the only other thing I would probably
Sure.
add in there, so balancing your mindset and your rest. And
Yeah.
actually, one of the things I've done, because I also went on my personal journey as well, and I'm
Mhm.
actually lighter now than I was when I was 17 years old.
Mhm.
Um, and I look younger than I am. Most people say, "Oh, wow, you look younger for your age," and that's
Mhm.
exactly it. Ensuring I have movement, I have the right food intake. I also know when I need to have some rest.
Yeah.
Very important, especially if you have some neurodivergent. Sometimes I just actually get to a point where I'm just like, I have to stop for today, or actually I'm going to take a couple hours off this morning and just chill, because
Mhm.
then I'm going to be more productive. I'm going to be more
Yeah.
focused, and it's actually finding that balance, and it's finding that balance, as you said, between movement. It doesn't mean you have to become a gym bunny. It doesn't mean you have to quit eating chocolate.
Yeah.
We have to have certain small indulgences in life because life was meant to be lived and to be enjoyed,
Yeah.
and it's finding that balance.
And the indulgences can be a part of the actual strategy. And that was what I wanted to actually make very clear is if you understand those requirements, you can actually, for me, I ate an entire bar of chocolate. I never got rid of anything I actually liked. I just fit it within the strategy because I understood the requirements. And I think that's really that's applicable to a lot of problems. If you understand the requirements, you can challenge the status quo and become with a more effective solution. And that could be a formula for a founder even as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to your next year plans, Ross, with regard to Voya AI, MP, or anything you want to include for the podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm still involved in the games industry, so I'm looking forward
Mhm.
to some of the releases we've got coming out there. Obviously, Voya AI is going to market right now, so I'm very excited to see how that gets perceived by the market. And hopefully next year we'll get MP out into the market as well.
Mhm.
And I'm also really excited to work with people around my book. I have
Mhm.
a passionate project for people who maybe come from a bit of a neurodivergent background, who maybe made the wrong choice, and obviously didn't get into entrepreneurship but want to, and be willing to and like to work with some of those people going forwards and help them to be able to create the life that they really want. So that's some of the plans I got for next year, as well as trying to remain reasonably healthy and focusing on my family as well. And I think that's essentially what my plan is for the next year.
And Ross, where can people keep up with you and your companies?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Ross Farrow. I also have my website, which is rossfarrow.com. So feel free to reach out to me anywhere along there, and you'll be able to see my companies. Voya AI is myvoya.ai. MP hasn't got a website right now, but should do shortly. And just ping me and reach out to me anytime, and I'd be very happy to keep in touch or share ideas or build a network and get to know people. It's one of the things I love doing every day.
Well, this was the Apex Perspective podcast with Ross Farrow and Aryan Mohindra. Thank